How is it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today we are, of course, taking a look at some of the extra information that we have with the release of the brand new double-barreled tanks that we're having in World of Tanks, finally coming to the game, which is a pleasant surprise to see it before Christmas, and it will be an interesting one because I'm sure that during the release of the new season is when they'll be bringing out the rest of the double-barreled tanks, at least hopefully. Of course, the season is delayed for 2 weeks from tomorrow, so we'll have to wait 2 weeks with no season that we can actually grind towards, because this season is going to be prolonged. It's going to be a 10-week season as opposed to your typical 8-week season that we currently have in the game, as with the last few. And that's because of primarily what Wargaming have said, which is that there's a lot of breaks coming up for, of course, staff and stuff like that. So they've prolonged it an extra 2 weeks, which is why we have a 2-week time difference between our typical seasons. But in terms of the new content, of course, we had a video recently on the new 2023 Black Tanks, which includes this double-barreled Object 703 version 2, and a quick rundown is that it costs you 7,000, just over 7,000 gold to be able to pick it up if you want to get it. It's in bundles, and then of course we've got a brand new tank that kind of looks like the Stingray, and that is the Jaguar. But I wanted to cover some extra bits of information that we've received, which is that we have a Black Friday tank earn operation where you can pick up a free black tank, as well as cover what these new tanks are going to be like in terms of the double-barreled vehicles, so that you know how to take them out and stuff like that, what they typically play like, and we'll have a look at some of the armor models so you know how you can best deal with them in the game. But of course, back to the free tank earn operation, so you can pick up one of 3 different vehicles from my knowledge, which is, of course, this vehicle right here. But earn 1,000 more XP will give you 1 point, and that is going to be really nice. So every single 1,000 XP you get, you'll get 1 point. Destroy 1 or more vehicles in a battle will give you 1 point, so maximum of 2 points per game. But because they are all repeatable, if you destroy multiple tanks per game, you will be able to get extra points. Moving on, we stated that you can earn black tanks, but that's just half the story. The T-77 and Su-130 PM are also up for grabs once you complete their designated stage. This means you can earn one of the tanks along with its Black Friday skin, while Black Tank Earn is live. So not only will you be able to pick up the T-77, but you'll get the black skin to go with it, along with the Su-130 PM. If you choose either one of these, you'll also get the black tank skin as well. But if you've got all of those, you will want to pick some of the other tanks that are available. So with this year, what have we got? Well, it is a typical earn operation where you can pick your tank and decide which one you actually want to get, and that is based on how many points you earn. Now, once you select a tank as a reward, as with the Monster Hunter tanks, the challenge ends. So make sure that you aren't selecting the first one that you get, because if you do that, you won't have option to actually pick any of the others. So it is a case of earning as many points as you can, and then right at the end, picking the tank that you can actually get or want to get out of the list of ones available. Don't go just getting the first tank that comes in, because that will mean that you can't then get any others. So really big thing, just really try not to go out and purchase, all of these tanks straight away. But what we have is an operation, and with that we have a variety of points that we get, as we've mentioned, but you have a total of 225 points if you want to be able to unlock every single tank that we have available. But that means that that is the top end reward. If, for example, you get to 100 points and the tank that you want is at 100 points, then you might as well redeem it there. There's no point in getting extra points if it isn't going to give you anything. But, of course, the tanks that we have available then are in the form of the Jagdtiger 88 2021 Black Friday tank skin. So if you redeem it, you will be able to get it, and it's actually unlocked upon completion of the actual thing. So once you get 20 points, or 40 points in total, it's cumulative. So once you get 20 points, that's on top of the original 20 that you'll have to have got before it. You'll be able to unlock one of these, or the Jagdtiger 88's Black Tank skin, and then of course Black Tank Earn 4 will give you the opportunity for the T77 skin, then you get the SU-130PM skin at 80 points, and then the T55A at 100 points. But bearing in mind these are only the skins, so if you redeem them, I'm not entirely sure whether this will count as an actual get it, but I'm sure that maybe once you actually get the stage, you'll be able to actually get the skin. I'm not entirely sure. So as you complete these, maybe they will just appear in your account, but I'm unsure. So don't go picking them if you're actually wanting a tank, because it will only reward you with the tank skin from what I can gather so far. But of course, as we progress, we'll find out, because it will just unlock on your account if it is just a case of getting to the point total. But then you get to the actual first tanks that you can pick up, which is the T77 and the SU-130PM. Now, the T77 is a 3-shot 360 alpha damage autoloader from my knowledge of the game. Yep, it is indeed. And this is capable of therefore doing 1080 damage in its clip. It's a really fun tank. I enjoy playing the T77. It's a really nice one. I think it's pretty competitive. Its penetration's good on both the standard and the APCR, which means you can earn a bit of money. It doesn't get any bonuses to the silver with this one, but at the end of the day, it's all about having the clip potential that this tank has, but it doesn't get the best damage per minute, so it is a little bit lackluster in that department, as well as having not particularly great armor, as you probably can expect from a T57 heavy style type vehicle that we have in the game, where the cheeks are really weak, and of course the hull armor is pretty weak as well. But T77, it's a good choice. I like it. The SU-130PM, similar sort of story in that it's a very nice tank to actually pick up, and it is a high alpha damage tank destroyer that is very, very good at remaining undetected, as well as spotting, as well as moving around the map, and has brilliant HE rounds that are super fun to use as well. And they have a decent amount of penetration, considering that it isn't a 150mm gun or higher. So this tank, very, very good at being able to just dish out huge amounts of damage, and is probably one of the more competitive tank destroyers at tier 8. So it's definitely worth potentially thinking about picking this tank up if you don't own them, or you maybe already own the T77. Maybe you want to pick up this tank. Then, of course, we push all the way through. You can get some inscriptions, vouchers, blah, blah, blah. But then you get to the final one, where you can pick up the Lerva Black or the CDC, the AMX CDC Black. Now, one thing that I want to highly recommend to you guys is that the CDC, or the CDC Black, whatever you want to call it, this tank is very lackluster. This tank is a tank that was originally released. It was really pretty decent vehicle back in the day, but since then it has become a thing of power creep. It is left at the bottom of the pile, to be honest with you. It is very, very fast. It's got some buffs, I believe, recently, which make the tank slightly better, but at the same time it has 240 alpha damage, has pretty horrendous accuracy given the speed that this tank can get up to, and we don't actually have the dispersion values, I don't believe, but the gun will bloom out massively when you're on the move, which makes it very annoying for when you're trying to actually, go full pelt, get to a position, and then you have to spend ages aiming because your bloom has gone out so massive that you just can't hit anything, and that is really annoying to have happen in the game, and it makes the tank a little bit annoying to play, but it's still a really fun one. I actually 3-marked the standard CDC ages ago when it first came out, but it's a good one. It has good view range. It's fairly reliable when it comes to remaining undetected, but at the same time it's not the greatest. It's quite big, and so gets hit very easily and will get penned by basically everything. And the armor model of this tank has basically no armor, so it can get penned by HE rounds quite easily, and things like KV2s will genuinely be laughing at you when they see you in the game, because they can pen you with their HE for like 900, and of course artillery, being artillery, we all know what they're like, will love to see one of these vehicles. So just be aware of that if you're thinking about picking up the CDC Black, because it is not a competitive tank. It's okay, and by some of the best players in the game, yes, it will be really good, because they know how to use DPM, they know how to position, blah, 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 they know how to use accuracy and stuff like that. Yes, the tank can be good, but for the most part, for the average player, for basically everyone, this tank is not particularly very good. And so, yeah, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone out of all 4 of the tanks that we have available. Then we have the Lerva Black, which is a fairly interesting heavy tank. It's actually the most expensive out of the lot of them because it is a heavy tank. Generally, heavy tanks will cost more to be able to purchase out of all of them, and it's a black version, which is a bit more rare, I guess. So, yeah, the Lerva Black, I think it's the one I'm going to be picking up in the actual game just because it's rarer. I have both the T77 and the SU-130PM, and I have the CDC. I just don't have the Lerva Black from memory. Maybe I do. But I know I have the Lerva. So, I mean, I have all of the vehicles, but just not the skinned version of the Lerva Black. So, I think generally my tier list as to which ones to go for would be, if you haven't got any of them straight off the bat, then I would recommend the SU-130PM. Obviously, if you don't like tank destroyers, regardless, just throw that in the bin and go with the next one. Then I would recommend probably getting the Lerva Black since it's a little bit more rare. It doesn't usually come on sale. It's usually only available in Black Friday, and it's a fairly okay vehicle, even if the armor doesn't necessarily hold up in the higher tier games. But then you have the T77, which is probably my next recommendation, just because there's a lot of vehicles similar to it, and there's some in the tech tree that you can pick up for free. So, you know, if you really enjoy those, then maybe the T77 is for you, but it's very similar to some of the other vehicles we have. And it's basically the similar sort of vehicle as the T54E1 or the Renegade as it's known on World of Tanks PC. But yeah, there's loads of different tanks with a similar sort of playstyle is what I'm trying to get at, so maybe you don't want that one. Then, of course, final one is the CDC Black, but, you know, that just depends on whether you think you'll like the tank, and it is a fun tank to play. It's just not very... you get punished really hard if you make a bad play. So for the most people, it's going to be horrible and probably one of the worst tanks out of the lot of them. So that's the Black Friday tank earn operation for you guys to have a look at. Of course, review it. Your guys' opinions might be completely different. I'll be interested to see what you guys say in the comment section. And if you have any queries or questions as to various different tanks, and maybe you know exactly what the skin situation is, I'm assuming that you have to actually choose them, which means you aren't going to be able to get the tanks. So yeah, just heads up on that, and just make sure that you check it out when you go on the game. Don't go choosing them and then realizing you can't actually pick a tank for the operation. So that's just one thing to be aware of. And then we have the rest of the news that is available. So we have 2 weeks only where you can pick up some bundles for the black tanks. I might as well cover it since we're here. And this is the generic World of Tanks console. Throw everything into a giant bundle and charge you 42,000 gold for it, which is the Back in Black Mega, which comes with basically most of the black tanks available, except from the new ones and last year's by the looks of things. But that's 42,000 gold, so it will cost you about £130 or something crazy like that for this bundle. Maybe slightly less, £100 or $130 or $120 or whatever it might be in your country. So very expensive, wouldn't recommend it. Most of the tanks are very old and not particularly very competitive, including things like the CDC and stuff like that. So yeah, I would usually not recommend spending that and buying better bundles that are in the store. Of course, then you have loads of different bundles and variants of them all, or you can purchase them all on their own for 40% off, which is what I recommend you do if you do actually want to pick up some of these black tanks on their own, which is the way to go in my opinion. If you do want a specific vehicle. And once again, if we go back to the Lerva and the CDC, if you pick the Lerva, it will cost you 9,200 basically gold to get it normally. So getting it in the operation, it's going to save you a lot more gold than if you purchased selected, whatever you want to call it, the CDC Black, and then wanted the Lerva, because, you know, the price difference between the two is about 3,000 or 2,600. So yeah, just be aware of that. It will save you a bit of money in the future if you want to purchase both of them. So always pick the free earn challenge if it isn't so much better having the lower tier vehicle or the cheaper vehicle, if that makes sense. But there is, of course, Black Friday skins, which you can pick up all of them for 18,000 gold. So that includes the T55A, the 165, the Patton, the IS-3, E75, E5, T-32, T-77, Emil 1951, the T-92, the Jagdtiger 88, and the Su-130 PM. And those are all of the Black Friday skins for 18,000 gold, so 50% off the skins. And then you can get various different vehicles as well, including their skins too. So that is the skins, but let's jump over to the brand new vehicles, which is probably what you might be here for originally. Now then, we are here on tanks.gg. This is a website that you can all go to. It is very good way of learning the sort of armor models that tanks have, even if it does relate to World of Tanks PC. So it's based on their armor models. Console's armor models have a slightly different thing on various different tanks, but in a general case, most vehicles are the exact same. It's just some vehicles might be slightly different, but it gives you a really good indication as to where you can kind of look at armor and stuff like that to be able to pen vehicles. So obviously when we look from the front of the 703 version 2, you can see the lower plate, which you can pen quite easily. It's not really a problem when it comes to that, so just be aware of the lower plate. So this is something you can pen very easily. The upper plate has 250 millimeters, so might be a little bit of a difficult thing to be able to pen, at least when you're looking at it in tier 8 vehicles or below. So try not to aim at that, try and go for the lower plate if possible. Of course, the main thing is, the lower plate. If you can hit that, go for it. If you can't, then it's not particularly great because, the best chance on this is the cupolas. But as you can see, very small cupolas, which make it quite difficult to pen. But there are a few points where you can pen. Just under the gun is 225 millimeters, which if you're using premium can basically be penned by most tier 8s. And of course, the upper plate becomes so much easier when you load premium ammunition because it's just a sheer value penetration that you can just basically go straight through it. And then of course, as soon as it starts to move to the side, you can see that the turret is quite weak to any rounds, about 200 millimeters of penetration. So you'll go through that with most vehicles. And then on the side, it's a similar sort of story, with the side of the turret being relatively strong, given that it is the side of a turret, and so always go for the side of the tank if possible. Rear of the tank, typical, whatever, you can pen it with basically everything except from HE because it needs 90 millimeters, so you'd have to be in a tier 10 tank destroyer with HE rounds, or something with like a 800 alpha, 750 alpha, that sort of thing. With HE usually has about 90 pen, but it's still a little bit of a risk to do it. But with that being said, that is the Object 703-2. The key thing is that it does get penetration differences between when you are using the different guns. So for example, if you're using the double pump, you're going to have to reload for longer than when you're using it in a single shot, because that's how they work. And when you see them in the game, what you'll see is that this gun will fire first, and then the right gun will be your second round. Now, when it comes to reloading, what will happen is if you fire this one off, then this one, then you'll reload this one, and then it will reload another shell in this one. And so the first shell always takes longer, then the second shell is quicker, so you want to be firing in single shot with the second shell loaded. So that way you've always got one in reserve, but you are getting better damage per minute with this first one. So you will see it in the videos that we'll do in the upcoming videos based on this tank when it's released on Tuesday. So we'll do a full video on that. But as for those of you that might not know, we can actually have a look at where the new tech tree line is going to come in and some of the tanks that are also available, since you'll probably want to know for when they do get released eventually. So how do you actually obtain the double-barreled tanks for free if you don't want to purchase the premium version that's coming out on Tuesday? Well, they come in at tier 8, and so it comes off of the KV3. So if you want to prepare for when they come in, then I'd recommend building up enough XP to be able to get the KV4, so that when the IS-2-2 comes into the game, you'll be able to instantly get it. It won't cost you a ton of free actual XP because it is only a tier 8, and so will cost you probably in the region of about 50 to 70,000 XP to be able to pick up the tier 8. So you could save that up quite easily. But the IS-2-2, we can actually have a look at the base version. So this is what it looks like. It actually gets a pretty lackluster gun. And you might be thinking, well, how come the 703-2 has 390 alpha, whereas this similar tier vehicle gets 300 alpha? Well, it's because Wargaming love giving premium tanks higher alpha damage and generally better and more competitive vehicles. So IS-2-2 is generally worse than the 703-2 because it doesn't get the alpha damage, and yeah, it's basically that. It's slower, and yeah, in general, not particularly the greatest of tanks. Even if the 703-2 gets slightly worse accuracy, this one will be yeah, a little bit less usable, and it does get 7 degrees of gun depression versus the 5 on the premium, but it is, yeah, the alpha really ruins this tank for being a competitive heavy tank at this tier, but it's still okay, so I wouldn't fear all too much. Armor model is also slightly worse, whereby the lower plate is worse, the upper plate is worse. As soon as you angle to the side, you get these kind of side plates which can be penned everywhere. The turret is worse, so you get my drift. Cupola is more prominent, so can be penned, therefore being worse. And yeah, the side armor doesn't get spaced armor on this upper bit, which means it's worse and therefore getting penned easier. So yeah, you can kind of get my drift with the premium being better than the tier 8. And some people even make the idea that it's also better than the tier 9, but yeah, I mean, I can see why, because the lower plate and the upper plate are basically the exact same, and the IS-3-2 does get the same gun. It is the same speed, and of course a tier higher, 8 degrees of gun depression though on the IS-3-2, and it gets better damage per minute as well, I believe, but it's not by a massive amount considering that one's a tier 8 and one's a tier 9. So that's kind of how this tank will work. It doesn't really have too many weak points. It's just the lower plate and the upper plate, and then the cupola if you can hit it. Of course, as soon as it angles like this towards you, so if we look at the visual model, you'll see that there's this plate you want to hit here. Of course, if it does the opposite side, you want to hit here. Don't aim over here. And then the lower plate, you can actually pen through the side of the track. So if we go to the live model, you can see you can go straight through the track here, and then the side armor is pretty garbage. So side scraping in this thing, you want to keep it very tight if you're going to do it, but it has this plate here which can be penned. So often what a lot of people will do when they play these vehicles is to reverse side scrape. So you can do something like this, whereby you don't get the as much of the upper plate when you're actually side scraping out, because you don't have an upper plate at the back of your vehicle. You just have to be very good at avoiding getting this area right here underneath the gun from being penned. So that's kind of how you can use these tanks if you want to use them. But that's just how one way of using these vehicles. But of course, you might want to know what the top tier tank is. It's the ST2, and this is a very interesting one. This one has a key weak point, which is right here. You can see it has like a weird little divot area that kind of bulges out from the hull armor. You can see it on elevation here, and basically we'll be able to get penned quite easily. Its lower plate is pennable quite easily. The upper plate is also pennable quite easily. As you can see, these tanks are not particularly the best at bouncing rounds, but they can still do it, and I'm sure people will be able to bounce a couple of rounds. The actual, when you side scrape with this vehicle, this kind of cheek area here is actually not awful. It will bounce a few rounds because it's angled in both directions, which is good. But once again, as soon as you load heat, it's going to get penned, as well as the turret as well, because it is an STI turret. Or an ST1 turret, whatever you want to pronounce it as, and it gets cupola as well, but it's quite hard to be able to pen with tier 8 vehicles and tier 9, so will require some premium to go through. So that's kind of how these tanks work. Of course, the ST2 gets 440 alpha as opposed to the 390 of the tier 9 and the premium. So that's kind of how they work. Hopefully that was a little bit of an introduction as to what these tanks are. You can expect that they're not going to be too overpowered, as they're not really on PC. Maybe console do something completely different and decide to break the game with these vehicles, but we never know. We'll have to wait till they actually get released, which I'm expecting to be in the new season, which comes out in about 2 weeks as of the recording of this video. And of course, if you're watching this later on down the line, they're probably already in the game. So yeah, you can see them right there. But hopefully that gives you all of the information that you need for this week. There are, basically, and if I've missed anything or you want to check over some of the extra information, we've got the last video that we uploaded as of the recording will be on the vehicles and a bit more in depth on the actual 703-2 and the Jaguar if you want to see that, and some of the extra news and first news that we actually received bar this one. So yeah, if you enjoyed, like the video and make sure to subscribe if you aren't already, because it will be a huge help to the channel. And of course, if you already are, then yeah, you already are a big help to the channel. And I will see you in the next one. Have a great rest of the day and I'll see you there. Goodbye.